Hi, guys, and welcome to another edition of The Big Shift. I've got an unbelievable story for you today of a guy a lot of people would say, I've talked to a lot of the guys, especially the New York guys, who would say that this family was certainly very, very, very central. And they was, in a sense, a kind of known as mob royalty. Coming next. Hi, guys. Welcome back. Today, we're going into the story of a family of the father, a very senior figure in the Gambino family, a very historic family, a real trigger man from back in the day, guys. Before we get there, I've got to say a big thank you to everyone who's going into the subscription model, www.stephengillen.com. You guys are getting the book in there, The Monkey Puzzle Tree. Of course, that's going to be a film. I have to say to you guys, look, there's another book coming. It's called Injustice, Love, and Honor. I'm going to talk more about that another time. But now we're going to get straight into the content. He's a really good guy, knows a lot of the friends and the people that we talk to. I've been waiting to get this guy on, a wonderful guy. Today, my guest is Anthony Ruggiano. Hi, Anthony. How you doing? Welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Steve. It's my pleasure. It's been a while.
we've been trying to get each other. There's been a couple of times, hasn't there, Anthony?
Yes.
But look, I'm really, really happy to have you here. As I said, look, I know a lot of your friends. I'm privileged, a lot of your friends, a lot of the historic stuff that went on back in the day. They all speak highly of you and your father and your family. That was very central in them days, and Ozone Park in Queens. And in Brooklyn, Your father was a made man in the Gambino family, Fat Andy. He was a very central figure. Should we start there? Do you want to tell me a little bit about your father?
So, in the beginning, my father actually was with the Mangano family, which was the family. It was the Gambino family, but at first it was called the Mangano family. So when my father got out of prison in the early 50s, he was actually running around Brooklyn with his partner, Tony Lee, and they were young kids, and they were actually sticking up poker games in the Brooklyn area. And what happened, this wise guy named Charlie Wagons, who was in East New York, Brooklyn, reached out to this fellow named Albert Mayoni, whose brother was in Murders Incorporated, Happy Mayoni. He got the electric chair with Abe Rella, so it's very historic. So these sort of were the guys that raised my father, because my grandfather passed away when my father was 8 years old. So he had no father. So his father figures were all mob guys, Murders Incorporated. His best friends, they were their uncles and their fathers. So he was robbing these poker games, and Charlie reached out to this fella, Albert Mayoni, and asked him who this kid Andy is that's robbing these games. And he told him it's Liberty's kid brother, which is my uncle. And he asked Albert to, do you think you could get the money back? And Albert told him, no, either you got to kill this kid or give him a job, because he's not going to give you the money back. So Charlie met with my father and actually hired him. My father started driving him around. And that's how it started. That's how my father's road into the mob started. He started driving this wise guy, Charlie Wagons, around, and he introduced him to Albert Anastasia and to Anil Delacroce and all these people. And he was only in his early 20s at the time. And the story that was told to me through my father, he told me that one day Charlie approached him and asked him if he would be, if they asked him to kill somebody, would he be willing to do it without asking any questions? And he said yes. And that's right before he committed his first violent act of that nature. And then when he was 25, he actually did his first piece of work for the Mangano family at the time. But Albert was the boss because Mangano had disappeared. And then Albert Anastasia became the boss. And so that was my father's introduction into that family. And that crew, the central regime that my father was in, was actually Albert Anastasia's main crew that did all the work, all the killings and all the assassinations. Well, that was that crew. So my father at a young age was running around, and Albert used to call him the Kid. That was his nicknames. My father used to say, Albert used to say, send the Kid. And my father used to make a joke of it. He goes, yeah, I was 25. They used to send for me. I used to go to Manhattan. They used to give me a pair of gloves and a gun and say, go in there. No, he said, never no money, just a pair of gloves and a gun. Yeah. But, and that was it, you know, and then he became a made member in 1953. The books were actually closed at the time, but because of his actions, he was what they called a special case, and Albert straightened them out at 26 years old, which was 1953. It was the same year I was born, and, you know, it went on from there. It went on from there. Actually, I'll give you a little piece of history. Actually, right before that, when I'm sure everybody heard the story about Frank Costello getting shot in the hallway, grazed his head. Later on, they found out it was the chin that did it, you know, Johngotti. But when it first happened, back then, my father actually got rounded up because the description also fit my father, a stocky guy that, you know, walked side to side, because my father was he was 5'10", but he was very stocky. And they actually picked my father up and took him to the hallway and made him run up and down the hallway, the detectives and the FBI. It wasn't him. So I asked my father one day when I got older, I says, how do I know it wasn't you? He goes, because if it was me, he would have been dead. Yeah.
Look,
so, yeah.
That's a great story. Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah.
For the viewers, Anthony, I just want to go back a little bit, because I want to put some foundational stuff down for people who may, to hook them in for a bit more. So the books was open for your father, which was a rare thing, right? You know, so we're going right the way back at the times of Albert Anastasia, the Mad Hatter. You know, we know he was killed in the Sheraton, right? You know, in the barber shop there. But we're going right back to the times of Lucky Luciano, you know, with Murder Incorporated, all of this stuff. So this was the environment that your father come up in, right?
Yes.
Now I want to go there. I want to go there because, you know, to me, these was really historic times in the mob. Obviously, it's different now. We're going to get to that. But in them days, this was a very, very historic time. And Albert Anastasia, just like John Gotti later, he actually maneuvered his boss and he killed him too, right?
Right, exactly. Yes, Mangano. He was Mangano's underboss, and he actually took control of the family by killing Mangano. He disappeared Mangano, and Albert Anastasia became the boss. And then the commission ruled that it would be against the rules to kill another boss, that bosses weren't allowed to get killed without the whole commission voting on it. Because my father always used to tell me that Albert Anastasia was the toughest man he ever met. And he said Carlo Gambino was the smartest man he ever met. So after Carl engineered Albert Anastasia's murder, he put that rule in place. But before that, when Albert was the underboss, Albert Anastasia controlled Murders Incorporated, who did all the killing for the commission, and then Mangano disappeared and Albert became the boss. And in 53, when the books were closed, my father did so much stuff for Albert that they straightened him out because of what he did, because of the missions he went on, and he got straightened out. And then the books didn't actually open until 2 years later, until 55. That's when the books opened.
Look, this is a lot of history. It's very, very historic. So, look, you know, I mean, there's a lesson in there for me, Anthony, as well, you know, which I kind of know and I had to learn is brains is always going to beat brawn, right? Every time. Every time, right? But, you know, but there's a bit of history that from that point, and this is what changed, you know, about the commission, about you couldn't kill a boss, right? So that's so look, for you growing up, what kind of man was your father to you? What did you see him as?
I always knew he was special. I mean, as a little kid, I always knew, you know, he always got treated special. Whenever he took me with him, people catered to him. And I always knew there was something different about him than my uncles even, and my friends' fathers, because of the way he was treated when he took me out. When he took me to restaurants, the owners would always sit with us. And it was always, he got what he wanted, the best tables. You know, we always sat and he took us to baseball games. We always had great seats. He would take me to his bar on the weekends and everybody would cater to him. They would stick money in my pocket. So I always felt kind of special around him as a young kid, but I didn't know what he was into. But I knew it was something because he would tell me that when I went to school, if they asked me what he did for a living, to say he worked in a dry cleaners, because he had some guy with him that owned dry cleaners and he was on their books. But I knew inside me that he didn't work there, but I was a little kid, but so I really couldn't internalize it, but I just knew it wasn't true, but I said it anyway. In school, I would say my father worked in a dry cleaners, but I always knew as a young kid, it wasn't true. And my life lessons were different than my friends and my cousins. You know, and then as I got older, I would say when I was in my very early teens, 13, 14, when I started venturing out into the neighborhood, like getting off my block and venturing out to like the pizzeria, to the corner, to the schoolyard, the older guys would always point me out and they would whisper and I would hear them say, "That's Fat Andy's son," you know, and through that venturing out is when I learned that who my father was, what he was into, and also I read some newspaper articles about him, and then I knew that he was mobbed up. But I always knew something because there was always men in my house with suits and ties. There was always, you know, and, you know, he would go to the Copacabana and, you know, but I always knew something was going on, but I just didn't know why until I became a young teen. And what happened was when I started venturing out to the neighborhood, what he did was he would take me with him when I was like 14, and he would bring me to social clubs in the neighborhood to introduce me to the wise guys because he wanted them to know I was his son so they wouldn't beat me up if they saw me do something wrong. That's actually the first time I actually met JohnGotti was when I was 13 or 14. He took me to the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club, which was Charlie Wagner's club also. And I knew Charlie all my life. That was the man that straightened out my father. I always knew him. And he took me, and that's the first time I was actually introduced to JohnGotti was, you know, my father said, "This is my son. So if you see him around, you know, I want you to know that's my son."
Look out for him. Yeah,
that was the first time I actually met John and Angelo Quack Quack, actually. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So this is, look, you know, this is a very classical story, Anthony, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, where that would go on like that. You'd go to the clubs, look, this is my boy. Look out for him. He's a good boy. You see him around. You know who he is. Keep an eye on him, right?
Exactly.
So look, you know, we're going to go straight into the content because, right, so we're talking about Albert Anastasia in them days, right? So as it comes on later, you know, because I know you went on from that and you was very, you know, you were central in the Gambino family there, obviously because of that.
Right.
So look, what was your view then later? Because a lot of people, Anthony, they get this wrong. They just don't understand. They kind of haven't lived like that, and they just don't get it, right? So, what did you know? A lot of them say, "Oh, John, he killed the boss and this and that and all that stuff." He did, but what is your view then? So years later, on Johngotti and Sammy the Bull, Gravano, what happened? Bearing in mind our history repeated itself before. With Albert Anastasia.
Right. Well, with Albert, let's start with Albert first. So when Albert was always at odds with Carlo Gambino. Carlo Gambino was Albert's captain. Now, this is all stuff my father told me throughout the years because my father's captain was called Tommy Rava. He was my father's captain. He was Arnel Della Croce's captain, who later became Carl's underboss. And that regime did all the work, the murders for Albert. But they were at odds. He was always at odds with Gambino. So Gambino, he went behind Albert's back and got in cahoots with Vito Genovese, who didn't like Albert Anastasia, and they killed Albert. Actually, when Albert died, my father was actually driving to Manhattan with his partner, Tony Lee, who had just got straightened out, to actually meet with Albert and all of them, because he used to go to Manhattan a few times a week. He was actually driving, and he heard it on the radio. And he stopped and called Arnel up, and Arnel said, "Don't come to the city. They just killed Albert in the barbershop." So what happened after that, my father's captain disappeared. When Carl became the boss, my father's captain was murdered. He disappeared, and my father and all of them went on the lam. They were actually trying to kill Carl. They had a plan in place to try to kill Carl because they were Albert's main men. And Carl's cousin had got killed and Carl wasn't happy. But eventually, Carl called them all in. And my father was called into Albert's house one at a time. And Carl told my father, you were a soldier, you only took orders. And he took them all back. And he made Arnel Della Croce the captain. And actually, after that, that crew became Carlo Gambino's main hit crew. And they did all the work for Carl. Now you fast forward to John. John was in a beat kill situation because of the heroin. Paul wanted Angelo Quack Quack's tapes. That was a death sentence. Paul was against drugs. So there was no way John was going to give Paul the tapes. And I was there at that point. Tony Lee was still alive. And nobody liked Paul. So Angelo really, Quack put it together. He's the one that put it together with all the other captains, with Frankie DeCicco and a couple other families, the Colombos, the Bananos, but the West Side and the Lucchese's weren't in on it. And then when Paul got killed, John became the boss. And then they killed Frankie DeCicco. Then there was retaliation because he didn't have permission to do that. And the old school guys like the Chin and the Lucchese's, who had a lot of old school guys, didn't like the idea that Paul got killed like that. And they retaliated and killed Bobby Borriello. They blew Frankie DeCicco up. So there was some retaliation, and John had to straighten it all out and get it right.
Yeah, that's some real inside history there that's bang on. Quack Quack, he died of cancer later on, but of course with the drug thing, and then Frankie DeCicco, he was blown up in the car bomb, right? So that, that makes sense. Is, guys are going to say, well, hold on a minute, we put this rule down. If it's him today, it's going to be me tomorrow. Right. At the end of the day, there has to be a law here. Exactly. That's just to clarify it for some people who, maybe a bit confused there. So as it went on, and everyone knows about John Gotti, how flamboyant he was. Now, Anthony, both of us know some gangsters are flamboyant. It's just the way that it is. They dress well, they're confident, they have a magnetism about, they have to be that. This is the life that they live. They have to be forceful in what they do and how they are. Some are just like that. Now, there's a big thing that's made about John because, in the sense, you could say that was the beginning of the end. I mean, that's open to discussion, right? But what do you think that happened really after on what transpired between Sammy the Bull, Gravano, and him? What's your view on that? Well,
what I know of the situation, so after Paul got killed and Frankie got blown up, Frankie was the underboss. When after Frankie got blown up, John needed someone to make that had and that was well liked by the Brooklyn, like by Paul Castellano's men. There was a lot of guys in Brooklyn, like Jimmy Brown. He was a very powerful captain. Danny Marino. There was a lot of people there, a lot of Sicilians that were there. That John needed someone that could talk to them, that was friendly with them, and that could work with them. And Sammy was in the right place at the right time. And Sammy was that guy. He was, from that neighborhood. He knew all of them. He was raised with all of them, and he could put that together and to make the family a whole. And that's why he was chosen, because John needed someone to facilitate these guys in Brooklyn. Even later on, when John was arrested, because when I was away in federal prison, John even made a remark that after Sammy flipped and became an informant, John made a remark to some guys in the MCC that if Fat Andy was home, I wouldn't be in this position, because he would have probably made my father the underboss, because my father could have done the same thing, because he was very well liked by that Brooklyn crew, because they had a lot of money, they had a lot of power. Paul Castellano, them guys had a lot of influence, so he needed someone to put it together, and Sammy was the guy. Sammy was a tough guy. I mean, I know Sammy well. Sammy used to stand at attention. Sammy was a tough guy. I always got along well with him. And at the end of the day, when they were in MCC, from what I know is, they were going to throw Sammy under the bus, and he did what he did.
Sammy as well, I could see, you would know obviously a lot more than me because you knew him in them days. he was a smart businessman as well. He had all them rounded skills. He could do all that, but he was a money getter.
Yes.
Some people can't do both, Anthony. You know that. When you get someone who does both, this is what it's all about.
Right.
You know, now he was, you know, he had an eye for business and he knew how to put business together as well, right?
Yes,
so,
yeah.
You know, I mean, and for other people out there, just to put another little layer on that look, what I would say, certainly the way the dynamics are in a life of organized crime, certainly, even from what I know from my life, the dynamics of how this is put together are very, very fragile, but they need to be very strong. So when you get things that, you know, the proverbial hits and you know what, you need someone stable who everyone likes to calm it down.
Right.
So people can start talking again, right?
Exactly.
You know, and start seeing sense.
Yes.
Right. Before, because sometimes it can go too far, right? You know, and then that, you know, that's bad, right?
Exactly.
So
yes.
This is what I would say as an easy explanation to that kind of thing. But look, going on after when John was saying, you know, Sammy's saying, you know, they're going to throw me under the bus. And we all know what's transpired after, and this goes on. It's a very treacherous life.
Yeah,
what's your view on that, Anthony? Without a doubt. What's your view on that?
On Sammy, what he did?
On Sammy, do you think he was right to do what he done? Do you think John was positioning him? He didn't care. He was throwing him under the bus.
I mean, from what I understand and from what I understand about the tapes and everything, probably Sammy was going to take the brunt of it. You know, Sammy was going to take the brunt of it. And let me put it to you this way. My relationship, I got to explain a little bit about my relationship with Johngotti compared to Sammy's relationship with Johngotti. My father knew Johngotti since he was a kid, a teenager from East New York, Brooklyn. So my father always knew John when he was a 14, 15-year-old kid from his neighborhood. Johngotti and my father got proposed by the same man, Charlie Wagons. He proposed my father and he proposed John. They got straightened out by the same person. So there's a connection there. So I was always friendly with him before anybody knew who he was. He always looked out for me. He even when I was wrong, he would always help me. He always helped me whenever I went to him for help. But he was the type of guy, he made comments. I'll chop your fucking head off, you know, and he made comments about people. And that was just his nature. And what happened was the tapes were full of him bad rapping Sammy. Whether he meant it or not, you know, he said a lot of things probably that he didn't mean, which we all do at times. We say things we don't mean. And when Sammy heard him bad rapping him, I think that's what turned Sammy around that's what pushed Sammy over the cliff. It was all these derogatory comments he made about Sammy, that everybody Sammy killed, he took over their companies. He's always coming to me to kill people. What does he want? He wants another business, you know, and he was throwing a lot of zingers in on Sammy on these tapes. And I think Sammy took it to heart and he did what he did, you know, but that's who John was. That's how he was, you know, that was how he talked.
Do you know what? I was just reminded there, you know, and I had to think about some of the things. Even when I was in prison, you know, and you know, with them kind of dynamics, because we had our own groups in there as well. Obviously, you stay with, you know, who you need to be with and all that. But there's one thing that was always you had to be good at was the politics. Because the first thing is, look, they're not coming there. You know, they're not even raising their hands. What they're doing is they're clever. They're putting it in. They're putting they're maneuvering you, so they're stripping you down. And when you're positioned like that, they're bad maths, and they've got a couple of guys are taking that and saying, you know, and they find out who's with them and who's not. You know, I used to say a funny thing, even like others say, he's ripe for picking, right?
Yeah, of course.
And all that kind of shit. But I've got to be honest, that mindset in the cold light of day, people don't understand this.
Right.
And when you're isolated, then really you're in trouble. You know, this is when you're really in trouble. So this is how it starts, right?
Definitely, without a doubt.
Without a doubt, right? You know, so that was what was going on there as well. You know, and you go right for the jugular. People, they go for the jugular. You know, they feed into other people's insecurities about them, greed, all of this stuff.
Right, Without a doubt. And even when John, right before that, even when John was home, he was like, he was doing things that people didn't like then too. Like he was signing autographs. I mean, you know, here's the boss of a family. You know, he's in, and I know I was with him in restaurants, and I saw it with my own eyes. People would walk up to him and ask him for his autograph, and he would give them his autograph.
People didn't like that, Anthony, did they? A lot of guys, they didn't like that, right?
No. And his response to, and he actually, his response was, the public loves me, and the work, he actually believed, because he told me that he actually believed that that would save him, that the worst he would ever get was a hung jury because the public loved him. That's why he did that.
I mean, I have to say, for a man who was obviously very, very talented, right? That's backwards. That is backwards, because this is why they're not going to stop now, by any means, until they close that circle. All right, you know what I mean?
The government hated him. When I went, my father was in prison at the time. When I went to visit my father, and I told my father, "Oh, I had lunch the other day with, it was John Gotti, Joe Watts, Tony Lee, and myself, the four of us." I drove Tony Lee to a luncheon with them. And I said, so I was having lunch the other day with John. We used to say that guy. I said, I was having lunch the other day with that guy, and my father knew that was John. I said, and you believe this young couple walked up to him, up to the table, and asked him for his autograph, and my father said he gave it to them. I said, yeah. He goes, what is he kidding? You know, my father, you know, like,
film star.
Yeah, what is he kidding? Signing autographs, and you know that's what he did. You know that's what he did. You know, but like I said, you know, he was always good to me. He always treated me well.
Angelo, people in that life, look, you know, I mean, we're going to get to that because, you know, we should, you know, I know the environment, and we're pushed and we're shaped and we're groomed and all of this stuff, but we still have our choices as men, right?
Of course.
You know, and anyone would say about John, they'd say, you know, you can say what you want, but it's very clear he was a man's man.
Oh, right.
And he played the role. He stuck to that, and that was.
You
can't take that away from him, right?
No,
so you know, all these people, they come to try and chip away. This is what people do and twist stuff, right? But you know, it is what it is, right? You know, and you have to give him that. Not that I agree with that life, Anthony. I don't.
Right,
you know, I've been all the way through it. I've transformed my life.
Yes.
But I had to go through so much of that as well, and lost everything so much until I had a chance to know there was more, Anthony. There was more than that.
Right. Listen, I always tell people my father loved being Fat Andy and John Gotti loved being John Gotti. They were never going to stop. They had no intention of, they loved that life. That's all they believed in. That they believed in it with their heart and soul. And even today, there's still guys running around out there now. I hear rumors they're 80 years old. You know, guys my father groomed, like Nicky Carrazza. My father straightened them out. He's still out there. He's at 80. You know, stay home with your grandchildren. They just love the life. It's an addiction. They get addicted to the life, the power, the respect, and they're not going to stop. I know my father lived that life to his last dying breath, and John did the same thing. You know, and you know, are they success stories? I don't think they were. At the end of the day, I mean, look how they died. My father died. He had nobody left. He was lonely. John died chained to a bed. I mean, you know, how wants to wind up like that?
How successful is that? I mean, I'm reminded as well, Anthony, when I think of all of my friends, and these guys are talented. They could have been good at anything they'd done. They was strong. They had a wit. They had smarts. They was, you know, there was a force of nature. These guys, they could have done anything they could have put their hands to, but they're sitting in prison and they're never ever going to come out again. You know, I'm reminded, and there are so many. And then I think, do you know what as well is that you get so regimented into that lifestyle that, I mean, I remember even with me many years ago, I didn't know anything else, Anthony.
Right.
I didn't know anything else.
The same with me. I mean,
at that point,
literally, the same with me. Literally, I was born into it. When my father became a made member of the mafia the same year I was born. He used to say that was the best year of his life. He became a member and he became a father the same year. So literally, wise guys changed my diaper. So that's all I knew. I was never around any of all my male all the people that I was around, all the male figures were all wise, all in the mob. My father's crew, my godfather, even my wife, my first wife, her grandfather was a wise guy. My first wife was a Mayoni. Her uncle was Happy Mayoni. He was in Murders Incorporated. That's all I knew. I was raised in bars. When I was 16 and I got suspended from school, I told my father says, what do you want to do? You want to go work on construction? I said, no, I want to work for you because you want to work for me. And he told me, you could work for me, but remember, going to jail is all part of the job. You ready for that? And I said, yeah. And the next day, he put me to work in a blackjack game. And I didn't have my first legitimate job till I was 50 years old. That's all I know. I mean,
so look, I want to. I get that. I really do, Anthony. You know, like I say, I've talked to a lot of guys, and your family was right in the center of it. Yeah. So I'm going to go on to some other content, you know, because I like to, what I do when I'm talking to guys is I like to get to the truth, Anthony.
Yeah.
And I like to, because there's so much smoke and mirrors out there, and it's not about that, right? And there's no learning in that for no one. There's no mileage in that for no one, right?
No.
Apart from idiots, right? Yeah. So look, you know, we're trying to just get some facts here, right? Yeah. So look, you know JohnAlite well, right? You know, I mean, I interviewed you before. I was interviewing John, and you was there. You know, and there's a lot of guys around. Tell me about your relationship with John and how it was with John in the old days when, you know, when you was growing up.
When he was a young kid, he was a very good my brother Albert was a really good athlete, really good. He was a boxer. He was a very, very talented baseball player, very intelligent man. St. John's University, Dean's List, very smart. He winded up being John's baseball manager, coach, when John was a teenager. We already knew John's father. John's father knew my father. John's father was always in the racetrack, and I knew John's father from the racetrack. He used to love to bet horses, so I already knew the father. And then the son, JohnAlite, was a very good ball player, and he was on the traveling team, which was the betting, like the all-star team, and my brother was their manager. So he was always in and out of my house. My brother was his manager. They won a couple of championships together, and he actually had a very good opportunity, John, to become a professional baseball player, but then he got hurt. In the interim, he had met John Jr.
Yeah, we're going to talk about this because look, there's been a lot of to-ing and fro-ing, but I know, Anthony, you're someone who was there, and you know what's what and what ain't about this. What's your view on what's going on between them two guys? Now, bearing in mind, I'm just before, because I know you've got all the lowdown on this. Right. You go right the way back to knowing John's father, as your father did. Right. So you was there all the way through, right?
Right. When he started hanging, hanging around with John Jr., my brother actually told him, stay away from him. Just because he was actually with us at that time. My brother told him, stay away from him. I was in prison at the time. My brother told him, stay away from him. He's no good. He's going to get you jammed up. Stay away from him. But John didn't listen because it was a guy. He had the name, the father. John wanted in. John wanted into the mob. He liked the lifestyle. He was impressed by it. He says it all the time. He wanted it. And he wanted in, and he figured that was his best road in. So he got hooked up with John. He started making money with John. Actually, when I got out of jail and I found out he was running around with John Jr., I told my brother, how did you let this kid escape? He was with us. Now he's with them. What did you do? I got mad at my brother because he sort of let John escape to them because John became a good earner. And they were close. They were close when they were kids. They were close. They baptized each other's kids. You know, they were always together. But then it started getting, they started separating, and the kid got straightened out. He became a captain. He's sort of staying away from John. John was selling the drugs, but he was still taking his money. And now, my opinion of the whole thing, and when I speak to John, the truth hurts. And John is telling the truth about them, and they don't know how to handle it. So they have a big resentment. And they're attacking him. You know, they're trying to attack him, trying to shut him down because the truth hurts. You know, the truth hurts. I mean, we know where the bodies are buried. We know, the skeletons in the closet because we all grew up together, and they don't like it. They haven't, like John Jr. got found not guilty, got a hung jury. He was, I know for a fact, 99.9% of that indictment he was guilty of, but yet he walked out of court, which, all right, that's fine. But John didn't make none of that up. JohnAlite didn't make none of that up. And the truth hurts, and now they're attacking him for no reason because they don't want the truth to come out about who they are and what they do. And, their father's, like I said, going back to the father, he was always good to me. I have not a bad word to say about him. He always looked out for me and my family, but he was who he was. And they try to make him a saint. He wasn't a saint. He was a murderer. He was a womanizer. He was a drug dealer. But to them, they want to blow it up like he's a saint. And John is telling, and Alite tells the truth. And I think it just bothers them.
Look, it's obvious, Anthony, within these things that there's a lot of truth and there's smoke and mirrors too.
Yes.
But, and this is why I asked people who was there all the way through, what is your view? What people take from that is up to them. There's no judgment. They're entitled to their opinion, which is always, what I say. Right. But when you get some people who are spinning it all the time and attacking, this is something else.
Right.
So, I like a few facts here. Right. So, thank you for that. So, even now, so what you're saying is, in a way, I mean, I get that. So John was easy target, right?
Yeah.
He was an easy target because he turned around. So, he's trying to make his way, but really, he was an easy target, Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, and John, the kid JohnAlite, he was a killer. He was out there. He was out there making money, taking care of business. John had his hand out all the time. Junior, he was his partner with the drug business and whatever else they were doing. And it is what it is. And at the end of the day, John did what he did. John Prophet, he denies it. We know he did. He knows he did, but he denies it. And that's the resentments. That's the beefs he has.
So look, coming to this point now.
Yeah.
And this is why I started. We went a little bit further about the real historic guys who your father grew up with,
right?
And how it wasn't, because it's changed a lot now, obviously.
Right.
And the history is there.
Right.
So what do you think of that life now? What do you think changed it, apart from, no more honor, if you want to call it that? People standing beside each other, really, is a different way to saying it. What would you think it was that started to change this life, Anthony?
I that's a great question. So in the beginning, when my father was young, when my father was in his 20s coming up, to get straightened out, you had to do work. You had to commit a murder. You couldn't get straightened out back in that day before 55 without committing a murder. That was the rules. That's what it was all about. In 55, it changed. They started straightening out guys that had a lot of money, that were well liked, and the philosophy changed. Moving forward, you got to understand, my father's era and before my father, these guys grew up in poverty. They grew up during the Depression. My father used to eat pigeons. They had no money for meat. They had a pigeon coop. They used to eat the pigeons. Later on in life, middle class people, like I'm middle class, right? Later on in life, the guys that started getting straightened out didn't come up like my father. They never had to eat pigeons. They never had to kill anybody. You know what I mean? They were businessmen. Just the mentality of the person that became a wise guy changed. And then drugs, then they started breaking the rules with the drugs. They started selling the drugs, getting a lot of time. And then it just went to shit. But I think it has to do with the way people were raised. They were softer than my father was. My father, the way he was raised and the way John's family were dirt poor when he was a kid. They had no money. His father had no money. His father, John, they were dirt poor. There was my grandmother had 8 kids with no husband. Later on in the 60s, the 50s, and that's why Carl closed the books. After Carl became the boss in 56, 57, where after Albert got killed, Carl closed the books for a decade. They didn't get opened again until Carl Gambino died in 71. So for 11 or 12 years, nobody got straightened out because Carl knew what was going to happen. That's why he didn't want to do it. And it did happen. And my father told me, the last conversation I had with my father was in Elmira State Penitentiary. I was doing a bid in the end of 1998, and my father had got home from prison and he came to visit me, and we were in the visiting room. And he told me, listen, I'm opening up a fruit an import-export fruit business with some guys from Philly, with some wise guys that he was friends with from Philadelphia. He said, it's going to be for you when you come home. I said, for me? What am I going to do? What do I know about selling fruit? I said, why are you doing that? He says, because this life is all over. I said, what are you talking about? He says, we had two things going for us. Everybody feared us and nobody talked. He goes, now nobody fears us and everybody's talking. He said, it's over. And the RICO. And that's
So-
that. You know,
That's
it.
that's well said, Anthony. It really is. You know, you said that very, very succinct. It's the best way I've heard it said.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Look, I wanna let's tell us about the painting in the back. That's your father.
Okay,
You wanna
right.
tell us about
But
the
there's
painting
a great
behind you?
story. There's a great story to that painting. All right. So many years ago, I was in Johngotti's house in Howard Beach, and I'm in his house, and I'm in his living room, and he had these portraits on the wall, on his wall of his family. And I said, John, those are really nice portraits. You know, who did them? And he told me, he said, he goes, well, I was away with this guy that was a counterfeiter, and he became a portrait artist. So he said, I gave him pictures, and he made portraits out of these pictures, you know, photographs. I said, really? So I had a little black and white picture of that in my wallet that I used to carry around with me. Because that's actually in my grandmother's yard. And I had a little black and white picture in my wallet. So I took out my wallet and I says, you think he could do anything with that? And he goes, I don't know, give me the picture. So I gave the picture to John. About a month later, he sends for me and I go to the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club on 101st Avenue. And I walk in the club and he says, here, this is for you. And he gives it to me and it's wrapped up. And I took it home and that's what it was. So it's been hanging. That was about 40 years ago. I have that about 40 years ago because my son wasn't born yet, and my son's getting ready to turn 38. So it's about 40 years old. Yeah, it's been hanging on my wall. Yeah,
Wow, it's a great story.
yeah, yeah.
It's a great likeness, by the way, as well.
My father was
Oh,
just
maybe
straightened
now.
out in that picture. He was 26 years old, and my mother is actually 19 and pregnant with me in that picture. It was in the summer of 53. I was born in October of 53. Yeah.
There's some history, really.
Yeah.
Look, so now, look, I want to ask you, you know, Anthony, because, right, you know, we've talked about that life and there's a lot of that out there. But look, you know, I've had to change my life. I know
too.
that you've changed yours, right? You've had to transform your life.
Right.
Tell us how you've done that and what you think of this life now, because you know I want to get into the good stuff as well, the
Right.
real stuff for other people. So they have the real stuff, and they, you know, they've got the other parts of what this life brings. So there may be some learnings in there.
Right.
Anthony.
Well, the last time I was in prison, in 90, well, before I went away, my father's partner died, Tony Lee. He passed away. He was like a second father to me. I had a little bit of a drug problem through the years with cocaine, and I went into treatment. I went into treatment, and I'm clean. I'm clean now, almost 33 years. I haven't had a drink or a drug in 33 years. Yeah.
I'm 12.
Oh, congratulations! Yeah,
That's, you know,
yeah.
so you know, there'll be another like the rest of it. Doesn't matter, but
Right.
over, finished, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. So I went into treatment. I got out, and so he passed away. I went away, and he passed away, and then my father passed away in 1999, and then right after that, Johngotti passed away. So the three central figures in my life that I loved all passed away. When my father died, they took everything from me. They took everything. They stopped sending my mother money. They took all our whatever illegal monies we had coming in, they took it. The family took it. They were sending for guys that were bringing my father money every month and telling him to bring them the money, the family the money. And I started saying and I just started getting turned off to the whole lifestyle. The 3 men I loved were all gone. I started getting turned off to the lifestyle, and I was working on myself. I was in a 12-step program, so I was working on myself, and I was seeing a lot of stuff about myself, and I sort of got some faith. I didn't become a holy roller or nothing like that, but I did, get with a God in my understanding, Christ, and I started, and I had a wife, and I had 2 kids, and I just realized what the life was about. That here, my kids would cry when they came to visit me. But, and I got out in 04, and I went to work. I went to work for the first time, and I saw how, that I did have, I saw a different world. My daughter used to say I was the smartest person she met, and I never, I guess I was. I just had no direction. My father directed me in the wrong way, my father gave me wrong, like my father, I had an argument with my father once, because my father wanted me to kill somebody, and I told him no, and he got mad at me. These are the conversations I had with him. So I just started changing inside, and but I was still out there. I was still going to get straightened out because I didn't want anybody to catch a delusion on me. Then I had gotten arrested. I got arrested in 05 for a murder. I got arrested for a murder, for a RICO, a murder that happened in the 1988. My brother-in-law. My brother-in-law disappeared. I got arrested for a murder, and nobody helped me. Nobody helped me. Nobody helped me. And about a year into the case, a lawyer called me that found something that could help me, that found something that they needed some information over a motion. This was a really high-end criminal attorney, a mob lawyer that was really good friends with my father, loved my father. And this attorney was looking to help me, and they called up my co-defendant, Skinny Dom's attorney, and asked for some information, and he refused to give it to them because he said if he gave it to me, they couldn't use it at trial. But me, I wanted to use it in a pre-trial motion because it was really beneficial to me, and they wouldn't give me the information. So this attorney told me, listen, I'm going to tell you something that you need to do. You need to call the government because these people are looking to hurt you, that they're going to throw you under the bus. But I still couldn't do it. I would pick up the phone and I would hang it up. And I would pick up the phone and I would hang it up. And then I had a conversation with somebody to call the government. And I said, I can't disrespect my father like that. And the guy told me, listen, your father's dead. You did everything for your father. You've been in the street since you're 16 years old. Nobody's looking to help you. It's a different world out there. And I still couldn't do it. I actually gave the card to my wife, and I told her, when you get to work, call this number and tell this guy to come to the house. And she went to work and made the phone call, and they came to the house, and that was it. I surrendered. I gave it up. I just didn't want to live that life no more. I mean, listen, I spent almost 14 years in prison. I've been in the street my whole life, and I say today, the guys out there, they're not even criminals. I was a criminal. My whole world, my whole life, I committed crimes from the morning until the night. These guys out there today, they're not even criminals. I don't know what they're doing out there. These people are getting straightened out today. It's just a different world. The mob is a different world, and the Albanians are pushing them out. The Russians are pushing them out. It's not like it was when I was a kid. In the 70s, the 60s, the 70s, even the 80s. It's just not that way no more. And I just saw a different side of it. I saw a side of it that turned me off.
Anthony, look, thanks for all the inside historic information on your family and a lot of stuff back in the days, especially about a lot of very historic and very current figures. Now, I know there's a lot of really raw, really exclusive content in there, which if people look and listen, will clear up a lot of stuff. I wish them to go in there. They're entitled to their own opinion. But look, Anthony, thanks for coming on. We're definitely going to get you back on, and I wish you very well in your life now going forward. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Steve. And it'd be a pleasure to come back on. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Make sure to subscribe, like, go into stephengillen.com and sign up for more wonderful content to expedite, help, and support you on your own personal journey of success.